Well, hello and welcome to yourself. This is a director's commentary, even though I wasn't the director, of the Cymru Beats performance I did recently, just to talk about what I did.
From someone called Mylar Melodies.
I love that moment. That was actually my clouds in the case. For some reason, I have clouds set to with the text or the trig control to the center. And it shouldn't make a sound, but every now and then it does. And I love that it made a sound when it said that you might have seen a video by Mylar Melodies. And then I feel it's like the modular saying, hey, no, actually I make the music. Fuck that guy. Anyway, so it was suggested to do this very, very astutely. And I think it's a good idea just to sort of talk about what's going through your head while you're performing and some of the sort of thought processes, and to explain what I'm actually doing better, because it really isn't obvious. And it's even in the videos I make, I know that I'm kind of blazing through things, so it's good to just go over this. I wanted to start by talking a little bit about a question that someone else had asked on Patreon. Zolt, have I got your name? Turek, good name. Which was he was effectively asking, when you play that, who's this dickhead? Yeah, mate, you're going to have to show your face. Sorry about that. So I also love the person who described me as a synth Chris Elliott, which was, I don't know if Simon was a bit upset about me. I wasn't taking the piss. I was just a bit nervous. So I thought I would try and be funny rather than answer the question seriously. He's like, come on. Sorry, mate. So Zolt was asking, if you're thinking about playing live, what do you squeeze into Eurorack and what do you squeeze into desktop boxes? Which I think is a really good question. What he's getting at is, if I'm looking at playing live, should I be using a Eurorack or should I not even bother and I should use desktop boxes? And it's a really freaking good suggestion. And the answer is that, there isn't an answer. The answer is that you can totally play live with a modular and it's really fucking fun, but it's horrifically expensive to build up the system. Actually getting all the shit together to do it is horrendously expensive. And frankly, what I have created with my modular, to a large extent, is just is effectively like having three 303s on it, or 2 or 3 303s on a table, and a sampler and a little drum machine. But I would say that the modular gives you an easier way of kind of interfacing it, and from a purely practical standpoint, the modular is a lot easier to transport, even though it's a fucking pain in the ass. The big black lemon case that I have cuts my hand to shit, so my hands were raw while I was playing this. But it's still easier than taking a load of boxes. I was talking to Martin Dubker about it, and Martin said the first gig he ever played, he took a 707 and a Pro 1 and, a load of other things to a venue, and he set them all up and he threw it all together and he put them into a mixer and he played live. And he said it sounded great, but it was an absolute nightmare, from a practical standpoint of getting the shit there, getting it set up. Because you do have to make your life easier. I don't know how the fuck anyone could this is another thing Martin does, is his case cannot close patched. He had to patch his modular before the gig, which scared the crap out of me. I'm it's bad enough. I actually use, can you see I use labels? There is actually I label the cables that go from one case to the other, so that I sort of have a little, I just go through them, grab them, plug that into that goes in there, that goes in there. And then I know that the two cases are correctly connected and can work. This question of what to squeeze into desktop boxes, I would honestly say whole voices, things like the ARP Odyssey module. Basically what I'm getting at is you could use whole voices, and what you could do is just use Euro sequences. Because personally speaking, I think the most exciting and interesting stuff about Euro are the sequencing options. And I guess I'll talk about how I'm sequencing as I go. But that you could just make a 6U sequencing rig, and then you could just have a load of voices sort of clustered around it. It's only when you try and shove the voices in with the sequences that you run out of space. So I think there's a lot to be said for that. And, there are CV to MIDI modules. So you could generate, MIDI for your CV modules, MIDI from your CV modules. So I would just say consider using Euro sequences. I think that will be badass. And that's something I thought about. Like, I've got the ARP Odyssey. Oh, here he goes. Yes. So here we go. So I have the Peter Blasser rip of the IceQLF Mobenthi Eurorack modules loaded into radio music. And I started like this. I had one thing in mind, which was to I'd been watching the performances earlier, and I really liked how people kind of started ambient, and I was suddenly like, shit, I should totally do that. I should start ambient. So I was like, I'd found that demo in the radio music. I'd had it in for years. And was like, this is funny and this is meta, so this will be a perfect thing to start with. And so the radio music feeds into the clouds, but I've got the clouds set fully wet, so that if I have, and I've got an output of the circadian rhythms going into the clouds to fire the trigger. So literally that bottom row, you see there's two little lights on, that duck, 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 duck. You see I've actually drawn a little cloud symbol on it. So that one is directly triggering the clouds. And then what I'm doing is I'm adjusting the shape and the size of the clouds to let bigger amounts of the slice through. I haven't frozen the buffer, I'm letting the live audio feed through from the radio music. But it's just a way of chopping it live, and it's a really good source for just like random bits. Like, I didn't even know where it would start, and it started at this great moment here. So I'm just like listening and going, forces bottom, mid-top, mid-bottom. You can see that I'm sort of thinking like, I need to sort of start like building up to something. I have literally no idea what it's gonna build up to, but I know I'm gonna come with the bass drum. And there, can you see how I'm playing with Jove, the filter? I just sort of pulled it up, and it was already making that sound, I think because I was doing the video with Nick. And so I didn't change anything, it just luckily happened to be doing that, and it was nice to sweep it. And that rhythmic, wow, is because the second input of Jove is taken. I've just got a slow LFO made by Pamela's Workout, so I can turn up the second CV input and kind of make it go slow up and down slowly in a rhythmic way. And I don't change the speed or anything, it's just a bit hard to do it with Pamela's, but it's just a bit of free animation that I can just pull on. And then I've also got a pip slope controlling it. There's me adjusting the volume, and I'm like, whoa, it's getting a bit like intense. And you can see I've already started the bass drum and I'm fading it in, sort of easing it in. You can see the camera shaking, there's loads of bass.
So you see it isn't actually a pitch waveform, but you do have a control of a sort of pitch and chaos all at once. So you need
Couldn't have worked out better with that sample, really. That's so funny.
the audio rate, we're going to look at it and listen to it at a very high frequency.
So that's adjusting one of the multipliers on a Kemi's Castle, and I sort of did that once and was just like, oh fuck, that sounds great. I'll do that, repeat it manually. But I took out the sample, and suddenly it sounds really naked, and you're like, oh fuck. Like, I'm like, really? Although, it's quite nice, that little resolution, it sounds quite electro. But now I literally am like, not sure what I'm gonna do. More complex rhythm on the hats. So that's there, I'm adjusting branches. So I've got that hi-hat pattern going into the top row of branches and then feeding in via the switch mults to the 808 hats. So I just turned up branches to let some open hi-hats in. That's shortening the open hi-hats, I fucking love that sound. And the branches is set to full open hi-hats. back, that was branches, back. So now I'm going to now see the trigger riot there is actually advancing a row of the Z8000, which is sequencing the Akemi. So it wasn't running to start with, it was just running at the sort of default pitch. But now I've actually started that row running. It's the second to bottom one. You can kind of see the Z8000 running. Dun, 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 dun. Adjusting the pip slope. We've got a little bit of a groove going on. And I mean, the pitch was just what I had the Z8000 set to from playing around doing like trials. I didn't put a huge amount of thought into it, honestly, and I didn't really tune the oscillators. And that clap is just directly connected. There's no like switch multipliness, because I want the clap to be like this one consistent element. So I might always know if I go there, then I will get a clap, so that you can just turn it into a consistent groove. You just need that. There's like, you've got to have the ability to have just a simple clap or snare to make sure that it all locks in, especially when there's the opportunity for chaos. Adjusting the Akemis, trying to find like an interesting sort of sound. Hard though, Akemis is like nuts, obviously. Like as you've probably seen in the video, I know I'm not clever enough to like, to just reliably pick up loads of different sounds on it. You just have to play around. You can see I've got the second channel of the grids there is controlling the mute and snare. That's mute and snare. Adjusting branches, changing it to like open hats, and then extending the length of the hats. Just trying to keep it like changing, just trying to keep things changing, so it's not just doing the same thing. I'll probably chill out of it here. And then I'm just changing the trigger riot rhythm to change the melody. Because I feel it's grinding, that like melody's like gone on a bit too long. So I think that's when I take out the second operator of Akemis, and then it just becomes like sine wavy. There. Just like, gotta change this has been going on. And it's nice to keep it simple. That was something I was thinking about before, is like, don't overcomplicate things. So it's okay to just literally have a straight 4/4. There's something that like Dubker's performance is really good, and I hope it comes up online, because it was just really smooth and sort of polished, and he didn't push things around. Like during this whole set, I fly around, and I know that sort of is good, but I feel that in retrospect it could have progressed more slowly and just given more time for things to develop. But I don't know. It's just kind of, it's not like I'm trying to prove myself or anything. It's just literally, I was kind of led by the moment. It's one of my favourite bass drum patterns. Dum 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 dum. Need some hats on that. Trying to put the maracas on, I suddenly realised the maracas are not clicked in on the switch mults. Now they are. Faded them in to try and make it look intentional. Back to the Akemis. Alright, this has been going on a bit. That's the pip slope. Then I'm like, that's the one. So the one's like the real hero, I think. Such a good little module. Like, it's just like a 4 HP sample playback thing. It looks really boring. It looks like the kind of thing that you sort of wouldn't want, but honestly, like, just that. Like, it makes that. Dum, dum, dum. And I'm just using the default card that comes with it, and I can't even remember if I left that sound on because I particularly was conscious I was going to use it or anything. Because you just twiddle the dial and it changes the sample. That's changing the pitch manually on it. And I have the cheering machine feeding into it, and I think, not yet, but I have it so that the scale knob on the Turing machine is set right down, and I can use the Turing machine scale knob to send voltage to the 1 and pitch it up and down just based off of a clock coming from Pamela. So that Turing machine is dedicated to the 1 because it's such a useful source. It's just like whenever you're trying to think of like, fuck, I need to do something, needs to happen here, you can kind of go to that module, spin the little sample selection dial, and there's like whatever 64 samples in the default card, and there's just loads of really good stuff, and it sounds wicked. Like it kills on a big PA like that. Doof, doof, doof. Put your hands up in the air, put your hands up in the air. That's the Bassimilus there. So a little spangy sound on the magical Bassimilus Iteris Zolta. Now, what I didn't do is what I was kind of banging on before, which is like, I actually haven't got any modulation feeding into Bassimilus at all, which is sort of not what I said I was going to do, but why did I do that? I was just like, I don't really have... Well, I've got the modulation sources in the Trigger Riot, but what I don't have is a quick way of turning them on and off, because I don't have enough free slots on my Switch Mults. So I sort of just left it for now, but I'd like a solution so that I can kind of turn modulation on and off into that. I could just use the mute. You see the whole like bottom row of the Trigger Riot is kind of like, most of it's empty. I could use those 3 channels and then just keep mutes on, and then sort of plug in cables and just unmute them in order to send modulation to the Bassimilus. Might need to do that. I just was conscious not to have so much stuff going on that I'm like, fuck. There's like enough to be doing, but it would be good. I think I'm just manually sweeping the pitch there. I don't think I've got. That's the decay on the Bassimilus. And as I'm transitioning and stuff, all I'm doing is just listening. And I mean, I wish I could tell you like how I'm sort of thinking it through in that sense, but I guess what I would just say is like, it may not be obvious, I worked it out the other day, but I've been making music for 18 years, and that's not to say that I'm any good at it necessarily, because you can do it badly for 18 years, but I just have done it for a long time, and it after a while, you know, and especially if you play around with equipment loads, you do just get like a sort of feel for composition. It was something that John Biddulph was talking about, so go watch his thing. At the end of his performance, he did a little sort of speech, and he talks about composition and the thing how like become a musician and to perform live like this, you have to become a composer, you know, and that's not the same thing as a sound designer necessarily, and it's I don't know, just having a feel for what makes a tune. I don't pretend like to have that, because I'm diabolical at finishing music. Like, it's the thing I'm the worst at. That's why there's basically nothing of mine that you can find online. I've written hundreds of pieces of music over 18 years, but none of it is in a particularly releasable state. And that's also partly why I'm doing this, is because this system is like a hack to finishing music, because it's like, look, I made a tune right now. Let's make it and release it in the same moment. That's literally what this whole exercise is about. So it was interesting what I was saying at the start about, you know, when Simon was asking me, you know, I hear there's a release on the way. I'm like, no, literally, what are you talking about? I've never said that. I have no intention, but I had been thinking about it based on the idea that you know, Justin from Abstract Data did, where he used his system and just did multiple little passes. It's really interesting. You could use a live system like this to just jam ideas out and just print it and then just edit up your jams into a finished piece of music. I'm just very happy at this point. This is like, oh fuck, yes, it's working. And like turning up the fold on Bassimilus just made this Bassimilus doing that bang, 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 bang. It's just like, woo! Yeah. That sound. Just like the slow, like, short open hi-hats is like awesome. But yeah. This is me just like listening and just feeling like this is the moment when something needs to happen. There's no like grand design here at all. It literally is just like really listening in the moment and kind of having a good feel for like all of the various things, options you're giving yourself to do. I think the hardest thing here is staying mindful of stuff. There's a really interesting thing like during Martin's set, he just never changed the maraca pattern. Bless him. He was like, at the end of the set, he was like, fuck, I realised I never changed the maracas. And actually, I did notice that when he played, but it didn't really matter. But it's interesting, like the challenge is to recognise, is to not get too distracted by what's happening and always try and have a sense of the wider picture so that you recognise what's been going on for too long. Especially with like melody lines and stuff, I'm like listening. And obviously you're then listening, what can I change? Haha, Muggins, you didn't put it back to the original pitch. Because you're free tuning it. I like that, so I was like, I'm going to repeat myself. But yeah, you're just kind of listening. What could happen? Where could it go? Does it want to build up? Does it just want to change up? It's just, I can't sort of say how you do that, except that you do have to concentrate and just try and keep a high level, like, view of the whole thing and give yourself plenty of little options like the one and like the Bassimilus and like the clouds. Those are like the three kind of magic sources that'll, like, that's the one. That. So what I've done is just turned on the first grids channel, which is the top grids is firing off a lane of the Z8000, which is in turn feeding the that top row that I'm fiddling with there of voice. So there's grids, which is advancing a voice, and then there's a trigger right, which is advancing the Akemi's voice. Now, what I haven't done, which is what Martin does do, and what I think I need to do, is decouple the gate with the pitch. So every time it fires a little grids note, it is going to move on to the next pitch and fire the gate of like the pip slope. And it will be better from a sort of flexibility standpoint to separate those things, so that you could, for example, I was quite pleased with that. It's mad using verb as a sort of like weird reverse clap. Because if you separate the processes, then you can do things like have the gate on every beat, so it's like dugga 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 dugga, but then change the pitch every like 4 beats, so you end up with little like key shift. It'll sound very electro. It'll be like that sort of thing, rather than going like and like bopping around. So it would be good to separate those processes. And I mean, what Martin uses, he's got 2 precision adders in his case, and he uses a Q Nexus as an overall kind of like pitch changer as well. He can like, it's uniformly being sent to all the precision adders so that he can use the keyboard to key shift the entire system, which I thought was a really good shout. That is actually something I thought about doing. But I just don't have room for the precision adders. I'm going to need to like pull some stuff out. I mean, that Audio Damage Boom Shack, which I'm using for kick, I use because that is basically like a combination of, like, it gives you the flavors of 808 and 909 in one. And I was originally using like the BD9 and the Tip Top 808 bass drum. But to be honest, if I could squeeze or find something else, one pro tip from Alex at Rubberdub was telling me that apparently the new Snazzy Effects bass drum that he's got coming out is apparently amazing. So that was me trying to bring in Yakemi's Castle. And what I did just then was I clicked the disting, which I've got on the output to apply delay. I clicked it onto like LFO mode or something, so you can see me trying to go, why is the chemies not working? Turn off that, turn off that. I'm like, fuck, it still sounds fucked. There's only one operator on. And I'm still trying to like bring the show on. And failing. I'm like, why are you doing this? And it just turns to noise. I'm like, oh, it's fucked. Great. At what point do I give up? This point, turn it down. And then I'm like, fuck, what now? And so I'm like, right, I'll go to the grids, just turn it up, because we've had that for too long. So I just put the grids on full, so it's like, dugga 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 dugga. Racker on. So I don't use the chemies for the rest of the whole thing. It's like, fucked. I'm like, alright, okay. There we go. I'll use this. So I don't really combine two voices at any point during this, and that's something I've got to solve. I need to make sure I've got both working together. But I was like, oh shit, this works. I guess it just shows like the system is robust enough that there's enough things to go to. If you lose something, you've got like the Basilius, you've got the one, you've got all the hats and stuff, and there's lots of shit I can do with like the snare and push the snare around. I can mess with the bass drum itself, clouds, I could click the radio music onto something else and there might be some weird, musical sample thing like jangly bells and stuff. I found some like truly beautiful things emerging from that. There is a lot to be explored, and it's not that big a system. I was quite happy at this point. I was like, this is fucking great actually. Can you see? So I'm using distings on the output of both of the voices, both set to clock delay mode. I really like. My big beef with the hot glue is that it's only one send. It's really annoying. So I want reverb and delay. I mean, you can use the verb as a delay because I've clocked the pre-delay, so you can set the pre-delay, to a higher value, and then there's a nice slap back. But I do like really short verby. Can you hear? That's what I've done there. So getting like roomy verby sounds is nice. It doesn't sound so dry. It's got like a bit of a funk to it. So that's, again, it's Turing machine that's like pitching the one. It just keeps it interesting. It's always changing pitch very slightly. I'm like, yeah. Keeping it simple. And then this is just that wonderful like absorption and decay time on verb. If you take the verb, you turn absorb down, you put decay up, and size up, it just makes this hell drone. And I've got the hat going into the verb. So the percussion channel, which is a combination of the hats and like I think the Basilius as well, and the clouds, that's always like was going into the verb for a lot of it. So the hats create this little like extra sparkle. Ooh, that's the hell drone. Sounds like Kraftwerk. And because it's sort of, it seems sort of harmonically related to the rest of the tune, because I think it is just that percussion track that is feeding into the verb. And in the background, it's still just that top row bopping around, using the grids as a sort of clock source for it. Pitching down the one, which is still being controlled by a Turing machine. And then you see I've got my bass drum on like on a switch mult as well. I could switch the top row of Trigger Riot. I've got that available as a source, but I never actually used it in the set. Something I did when I was playtesting. It was really fun to switch from like Trigger Riot bass drum to Circadian Rhythms drums, because the Trigger Riot can just make these wicked, like, evolving probability-based patterns, which are awesome. It's just sort of letting it groove, really. Branches is doing its job on the hats, keeping them sort of changing. I think I was like looking at my watch and thinking, how long has it been? It's kind of short. It's only like half an hour. Pitch it right down on the one. Keep that verb horror. Fading in Basilius. Changed the mode. Took like fold and stuff off. I think I was conscious I knew if I pitch it down it would become a bass drum itself. Basilius. Sounds almost sort of euphoric. Oh, I took that out. And then it's pitching it up. Funny that whole moment just seems really well structured and organised, like I meant to do it, but I was just literally, it's just all in the fucking moment. There's no grand plan here. It's just like, oh, I could do that. You're just relaxed by that point. If you played around with your system enough, you kind of know where the things you can do. If you're listening to the elements, you know where they can go intuitively. So it's a case of just knowing your system. You designed it after all. That's the one, isn't it? No, it's the BIA. And so here I was like, this is a pretty good spot. I'll bring in back the sample to sort of give it this bookend. And so I'm using the, on the clouds, if you have the trig control to the right or left, it just adds extra wild trigs in. So I was just using that as a way of slowly bringing the voice back. I had no idea what point it would be at during, the sample, which is 25 minutes long, coming out of the radio music. No idea. So I'm just like, I'll fade it in and it will be what it is. And it turned out to be a really good moment.
Now I turn the chaos knob up a little bit. I bring the frequency up.
And I think I was conscious, like, this is a sympathetic crowd, and it's, whilst it is sort of dancey music, I knew it didn't. No one was dancing. At least I don't think they were. So I was like, I can afford to just be a bit ambient and play, just let it breathe, which is probably good to do anyway. So I'm trying to get the sample to just play back properly, and then fade out the synth. And I'll absorption, full on the herb. Make it howl fade away.
Things you can do with it. A lot of FM inputs. We'll talk about it. We'll tweet about it.
I was like, yes, perfect. Totally accidental. That's your introduction. I'm like, you're shitting me. I'm like, mic drop. I don't know who said whoa. Thanks, dude. I look really bummed. I'm not. I was actually like, yeah, it was alright. But I mean, I still feel it was a bit like that was all every moment could have breathed for a lot longer. It was kind of like, and now we'll go here, and now we'll go here, which is, I don't know, it's just like a slight reaction to the sort of, stage fright, as it were. But it wasn't actually scary once you're up. But yeah, just to answer John's question he asked, was anything, how much did you have pre-sequenced, which is a good question, because technically, obviously I said that it's not pre-sequenced, but my Z8000 did have a load of settings, and that was just ones that I'd found playing around, and I just kind of left it in that state, and I'd sort of worked out that D major on my intuitive quantizer sounded good, so I just loaded that up and loaded the Z8000 as it was. I could have knocked all the Z8000 pitches to 0 and then just felt it out as I went, but I sort of effectively, it just was how it was after rehearsal. So it's interesting. It's like you could give yourself a more blank slate if you wanted to. And obviously I'm using grids, which is a bit of a cheat because obviously grids has got rhythms in it, and I'd like to jumble up grids more. I need more like random sources, but I guess if there was one takeaway from this, it can be done. You can play live. Loads of other people are doing it. Tons of other people are doing it, and so can you. There's absolutely zero reason why you can't do it. It's just a case of designing a system that does what you want it to do, and practicing. I didn't do a crazy amount of practice, but by virtue of the fact that you build the system, of course you just you get to know it really, really well, and that it makes complete sense. It might look wild and impressive when you see someone else using a system, but it's only just because it's the one that they know how to use. Your system, you will know like the back of your hand, and therefore it will not be scary or strange or off-putting. Just try and design it in a way that makes life easier for yourself. Don't be too crazy. And ultimately, all that my system is like effectively like an XOX style sequencer, a grids, and a trigger riot for some jumbly sequences. And then just a couple of pitch sources, a couple of voices and some drums and some cool effects, and like a couple of little like sample based things like the one and clouds and radio music, and literally nothing else. That's it. So it's just a couple of voices, some effects, some bits and bobs, and some sequencing. It's like, and that's what Martin had as well. It was a very similar, he has kind of a similar thing going on, but just with his own little tweaks. You can do this. You really can do this as well. I am not, I might have made music for a while, but ultimately, if I could build this from scratch, you can too. So do it. You do it now. You make a live thing. Okay? All right, mate. Thanks.